careful what is on my background.
And we're live.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 3 of hashtag Art Project 2020 Art and Tech Expo. My name is Natalia, and I'm the program director here at the Vancouver Biennale, and I'm also sometimes a curator, so that's why I'm on this panel in both of those capacities. And here in Canada, we start off events with a land acknowledgement. So for those of you who are all across the world, this is just a thing that we do that acknowledges that we are on Indigenous territories and names the territories of the nations that we're on. So here we're gathered today on the territories of many nations because we're across the digital space, but also here in Vancouver, we're on the territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. And it's just helps us keep that in mind in the histories that we all work with. And especially right now, we're going to go into this conversation on curating, which of course is very much linked to colonial history in many, many ways. So anyways, I am going to bounce it off to Serena to introduce the panel. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Natalia, for this wonderful introduction. And thank you to the Vancouver Biennale for hosting such a great conversation today. So we're going to be talking about curating in the digital age and then touching around the concept of value and quality in art. So today we are joined by Kate Vass and Tanya from also the compiler. So I just wanted to start off this conversation asking everybody, what does it mean for you, curating, in the sense of curating art? So if you can give us a quick statement about what curation means for you, and then we can start off the conversation. So I would love for maybe Tanya to start giving us a quick intro to curating art.
Thank you, Serena. I know, really great to be part of this. So I guess for me, I'm a learning curator, digital learning curator. So for me, curating is about demystifying complex technological processes through playful, participative, and collaborative formats. For me, it's about giving audiences an introduction to digital art and facilitating a feedback loop between artists and the curator and audiences, so that audiences can delve deeper into digital technological processes.
Thank you. And Kate, what does it mean curating for you?
Well, I think for me, curating is a broad term. It depends on what do you curate, and if you curate in a gallery, it's one type of a curating. If you curate in a museum, it's a different type of a curation. So I guess, you know, from my practice, it's easier to speak from the perspective of curating within the gallery, where the curator has to take and wear many, many different hats and be responsible for engaging into the program and choosing the artists and doing the cataloging and writing the program and the concept of it, as well as the following the budget sometimes, you know, and it becomes a little bit from the commercial perspective of us to take care, maybe to have a balance between the commercial sense and the museum sense. You know, that some works I liked, for example, in our exhibitions, to add works that are not for sale, but really complete the exhibition for the purpose of the content. And I guess well, from my understanding, curator is a very important person, and I do respect a true definition. You know, true people who actually respect the term, because from what I see, there are many people call themselves the curators when actually it's you have to be very careful when you use this term, because you really have to earn it. You know, it's an honorable job. So I actually, you know, respect people who are truly curators. I would not call myself a curator, but I'm glad to work with them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And Natalia, in your experience, what does curation means to you?
I too came to curatorial practice not from curating. I didn't really know it was a job until I curated an exhibition, and then I realized that's what that was, which I then realized that that kind of will shape my professional practice for the rest of my life. So then I went on to try to figure out what was it that I just did. And in the history of curating, there is a lot of conversation about the origin of the term, which means to care. So even though there is this, of course, very colonial history of curatorial work, which goes back to museums and goes back to collections and cabins of curiosities and all of that stuff, which is very exploitative, the root of the word itself is care. So it is about how, for me, about working with artists and working with artists on like a deeper level than just selection. So Kate, I also have big pet peeve when people call themselves curators when all they did is they picked some work or some jeans or some Instagram content and put it up and said that they're a curator, which like, you're a selector, you are a tastemaker, you're an influencer, you're a designer, you're all of these things. But I don't know if that quite makes you a curator.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. And there are many curators like that.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that work. That is very important work that shapes the work in many ways that the curators do, because our job is to respond to all of that. But to work with artists and to bring something out in the artist's work, whether that's through exhibitions, whether that's through studio visits, whether that's through like supporting an artist through their practice without them ever actually being in an exhibition that you curate, but you're still a curator in that sense. So for me, that work and that very close relationship with artists is at the core of the term. So I'm really interested right now in figuring out what that means in the digital space, and especially in the time of COVID, when that care also means guiding artists through that change in a way and giving them opportunities that allow for them to continue their practices. So that's why, like, even working with Jessica Angel on the Voxel Bridge project and then on putting on this expo, it's an example of curating, but it's not curating in the sense that we picked some work and put it in the gallery. It's kind of a different form of it. So yeah, that's my vague answer to that.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's, you've all given very good definitions of what curation and curatorial means to you. And I think Natalia and Kate, you touched on a very important point that sometimes curating can be defined as a job, but also as a practice. So I think I also want to open these up, to anybody watching, because I think especially now with COVID and the fact that most people have been left at home and had more time to actually go through a lot of content online, whether it's Instagram or websites or virtual galleries. I think these meant that people tend to develop, in a way, curatorial skills. So I actually would like to expand on these points and see from your perspective, how do you think people relate to digital art in a sense of curating digital art, given that now so many different platforms allow for people to actually share content and describe the work. So how would you see curating digital art differentiate from curating physical art or material art? Maybe we can start off from Tanya again, going around.
Yes, for me, curating in a digital term means moderating the experience. So I guess the curator becomes a moderator. And we often work in more traditional art world is always about the image and something physical. But for curators, digital art means different things. For some curators, digital art means digital video or photography, but for others, a process and code is already digital art. For example, you can write a code on a piece of paper, and this would be counting as digital art. So for me, it's about mediating the exchange and mediating the experience, or that audiences are learning something from the artwork. And finding out something different for themselves. So for me, it's providing an entry point for audiences to understand something about digital art, not necessarily everything, because you cannot learn everything about technology, but just giving an entry point is really important. And as we've seen from all the talks so far in the conference, for me, especially interesting, it's been to learn about blockchain used differently in art and critically, and art actually made with blockchain. So sorry to delve out, but yeah, it's about mediation and creating a comfortable atmosphere for audiences and artists.
Absolutely, yes. I think it would be interesting to hear from Kate how this relationship, is developed in a gallery environment, because I think Tanya comes from a more museum background and has that kind of relationship with the audience, which is often about the learning experience and what is left with the visitor once they have come through an installation of digital format. But what happens in the gallery? How do we see curating digital art in a gallery environment in relationship with the audience?
I think, the gallery has definitely a benefit in comparison to the institutions, because we are more flexible in what we are doing. And also I have a freedom of choice, and usually the idea of doing a show comes from, majority of times, I have an idea and then I'm like, how can I implement that? And then I start searching for the right people. And I have a wonderful curator, lucky, God blessed me, with Jason Bailey from Art Gnome. So I usually come and talk to him and I say, can we brainstorm? Do you think my idea can be implemented? And then, I think it's always depending on the topic or the message that you want to bring to the audience. If we say, okay, we would like to make something educational, that it's digital art, and how can we curate digital art, then it's something probably to have a look at. I don't know, depending if it's a blockchain, for example. Tanya gave a beautiful example. If it's a blockchain and you're dealing with a crypto artist, then it really became quite easy, because you also can engage yourself with the experience on the Decentraland or crypto voxels or Somnium space, and you are ready to set up a virtual reality exhibition and attach the token, NFT, non-fungible token, which is the crypto work itself, to their virtual space, and it's going to be interconnected, and actually you have much wider range of possibilities how you can position the art, and you don't have to even stick to the physical world. But if you would like to engage yourself as a gallerist and do an exhibition about the blockchain, for example, which we did back in 2018, none of the work was actually tokenized on the platform. It was all physical, and some of the sculptures which were engineered and used with the technology of a blockchain, but we had completely different message. We had more philosophical concept of questioning the values of system and cryptocurrencies and economics, etc., etc. So I think, it also depends on what the idea is behind, and then you have to decide what type of artists you have, what type of art and medium they use. I also can just say that, the museum here in Basel, HEC, House of Elektronische Kunst, they did a block. They do, of course, many different shows, and they always start with the selection and curating depending on the topic that they have. If it's a political and economical concept, then of course they start the selection of the artists who might be fit into the subject first, and then according to the medium. Well, yeah, I can give many more examples, but we don't have enough time. So yeah, in the gallery, of course, more flexibility in terms of decision making. I have a spontaneous great idea, I want to do a show like that, and then I have to look at the budget and I have to look at the possibilities of how I can. Sometimes I just have a creative idea and then I engage myself. Sometimes people come and say, why don't we do the show? And if we find it possible, then we try to make it happen. But of course, in a gallery, we have a different problems with curation. It's a budget, it's a location, it's a space. It's if it's a digital, completely virtual reality show, then of course a limitation of a program, and that we cannot include all the artists that we want to work with. Only some of them, because we're also limited to some sort of amount. And yeah, I just, like, from one hand, it's beautiful to have this freedom. Sometimes you are not really happy to have this freedom because you are not an institution, and yeah, you have different type of obstacles.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's great to see how, the experience with the audience and in terms of what curation and exhibiting means, like whether it's in an institutional space or in a gallery space. I saw a quick question popping up on the screen earlier on, which was from somebody asking, how do you get noticed by a curator? And I'd like Natalia maybe just to highlight a few points in your experience, what that meant for you to notice an artist or a collective or anything that sort of, inspired you, that caught your attention, and how did you happen to maybe include that in a show or curate that?
Sure. And I think, again, it kind of goes back to my methodology and approach to curatorial practice. Just reach out to curators. We don't bite, or at least the majority of us, the ones I know. And even if the institution whose curator you're reaching out to will not necessarily program you into a show, it does not mean that that curator will not support your practice in a myriad of other ways. So yeah, like, reach out, connect, share your work, ask for feedback, ask for studio visits. Don't necessarily connect to ask for a show. That's another really big thing. I mean, obviously in the physical space, it's a little bit easier in a way if you're local, because you just reach out and you say, hey, can I have a studio visit? No pressure, just want some feedback on the new thing I'm doing. But you can also do the same thing in the virtual space. And I'm curious to continue building my curatorial practice in the virtual space so that I can see what that looks like in the digital art space, that people reach out, people ask for feedback, people introduce ideas to me that they're exploring, that helps me understand the context better, that helps me be interested in the work. I think the questions of value and quality, of course, have come up in the preamble to this, which those are very kind of subjective terms that are not quite easy to wrap your head around, because what is valuable or what has quality in one context might not in another. So, for example, work that is extremely meaningful to a specific local community still has a lot of value and a lot of quality, but it might not have that weight on the global stage, but there might be an aspect to it that connects to similar specific value and quality in another place. And then that's the curator's role to connect the two. So I know I've kind of connected the tangent, and I don't know if I've really quite answered the question of how people have gotten my attention, but people have gotten my attention the most by really emailing me and saying, hey, I love your curatorial work. I think because they know my work, or they have seen the work of the institutions where I work, and it resonates with mine. Would you be up for a studio visit? Or would you be up for a phone call or a chat? And that's it. It's not, can I have a show? Can I have a show in this Biennale? Can I have a show in the next Biennale? Can I have a show at your gallery? No, that's not really the goal of that reach, So that's the best advice I guess I can give there.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's a very practical advice, and it's good to share those tips with people. because it's always great to know, to have a call to action, what to do next, in case somebody wants to be noticed. Okay, so as we are concluding this panel conversation, it's been so interesting talking to all of you. I would like now to talk about quality and value in art. So to conclude, I would love for you to answer this question. And the question is, do you think the pandemic had an impact on the way art will be curated and valued in the future? So how do you think this time, this month that we've been indoor and less visiting physical shows, but rather be visiting virtual shows or looking at screens more than physical art, do you think that will have an impact on the way we value art and the quality of art?
Can you answer?
Of course, yes, of course.
There is a big difference between value and quality, and yes, definitely, to answer the question, was there an impact that pandemic has brought upon us? Definitely yes. There was a huge shift. Everybody knows it's not nothing new, that people start to watch more Netflix and all the videos and all the educational material, and all the museums came up with also some educational panels and exhibitions, virtual rooms, who has been implemented also for the biggest art fairs, etc., etc. In terms of the quality of it, this is a big question mark. Of course, if it's brought up by institution and they're just bringing it up in terms of educational purpose, by again bringing up something which they didn't have an opportunity to exhibit, because they also have, usually if you talk to an institution, they have a program up to the next 5 years, everything planned, and of course it's very difficult to squeeze in any additional new talents or something, some new exhibition. But now with the augmented reality, virtual rooms, etc., there was an opportunity to bring some material, and also to have an interviews with the artists and visit studio visits, to organize the studio visits virtually. That was really amazing, and people had time to watch everything because we've been sitting at home and use this opportunity. But if you talk in terms of quality of art, which is flooding the market, this is a big question mark, because this also brings for me a big concern, because the average consumer cannot really differentiate from their JPEG, whether it's state of art museum quality, or whether it's some kind of random copy paste from many other things that we've seen, whether it was generated with some AI and took months to do this conceptual work, or whether it was just animated with an application JPEG version placed in there, and it looks similar but different. And this is why I think the curation and the content is very important. And here we are, we have to educate, and I think that's why the curators are so important, to explain why this work is a quality, why this work is important, and why this work we include in the show. But the other one, which might look similar or even better aesthetically for the average user, would not comply with the requirements.
Thank you, Kate.
Absolutely agree with you, Kate. And it's a question who decides what quality is and what is not. And quality, again, is really subjective for curators and for artists and also for audiences. And I think quality is something that cannot really be numerically calculated. Quality and shouldn't be directly related to quantified value. And it's, again, the role of the curator to educate and create a learning experience for audiences to delve deeper into this. And I'm not only coming from your institutional perspective, also from non-for-profit. And I think going forward, it will be amazing to see hybrid environments and experiences, and what technology taught us all in the past months is that for some people it's more accessible, but for others it's not. So it's about creating an accessible environment, both physically and online. And also featuring diverse voices, making sure that as many diverse artists are heard as possible.
So that was a benefit, obviously, that now with also new tools introduced, that you can reach out to a wider audience of artists, worldwide.
Yeah, and I think it's been a year where all of these things have kind of come to like an apex point in these conversations that we're having, right, between Black Lives Matter, between the pandemic, between the elections, and all the changes just generally and shifts in the world. So some of the things, working at the Biennale and really focusing on the idea of public space and what public space means is really, really important, and finding ways that the digital public space and the physical public space can intersect, and people who can help us champion that. So aside from like a sponsor shout out to Ephemera, who have tremendously helped us make all of this possible, they've also really kind of taken us by the hand and led us into this with Jessica, so that we're able to create models that literally did not exist before the pandemic, and I don't think would have existed for us before the pandemic, as a Biennale that is focused on public space, where it has kind of plunged us into a definition of public space that we have been working on internally for a very long time. So now we're working on it between the digital and the physical and combining the two. So because that's really the safe spaces within the pandemic. It is safe to be outdoors, and it is safe to be in the digital space. So I agree. We have an internal chat going that this is way too short for a conversation like this, but it's also great for us to have a bit of a fire under our ass to find things really swiftly. So over to Serena to wrap up.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to give a quick thank you to Jessica and all the team at the for putting this together, to all the sponsors that made this possible. So once again, thank you all for attending. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and please let's continue the conversation across social media at the Biennale over the weekend. So thank you everybody. See you soon.